Hey, you know what? Those sharks aren't going to repel themselves. Some of the most famous names from the 20th century spent World War II taking on Nazis, the Japanese, and yes, even sharks.
Why should I be scared of you?
Because I got a reputation for being a dangerous man.
Paul Newman was indeed dangerous, but he was also colorblind. That alone dashed his dreams of being a pilot. Being a colorblind pilot would be extra dangerous, technically speaking, but the Army wasn't willing to risk that. So instead, in 1944, aviation radio man 3rd Class Newman was assigned to a torpedo squadron in Hawaii, where forces had been decimated after nearly 3 years of war. Over his 2-year stint in the Navy, Newman mostly took part in training missions for incoming pilots and combat aircrew, teaching them how to land on aircraft carriers. Newman was on a carrier off the coast of Japan when it was bombed by a Japanese pilot, and again when the US military dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
This is where you'll serve America best. Young men of America, your future's in the sky.
Between 1941 and 1945, Jimmy Stewart served in the Army Air Force. Before the US had technically entered World War II, Stewart was drafted and sent to an Army Air Corps base for training. Because he had logged 400 hours of flight time as a civilian small aircraft pilot, the military allowed him to take flight classes and fly fighter planes. In 1943, Stewart was dispatched to Europe as the commanding officer of the 703rd Bomb Squadron. Later named Operations Officer of the 453rd Bomb Group and Chief of Staff of a combat unit, Stewart flew 20 anti-Nazi combat flights. He remained a member of the Air Force Reserves after the end of World War II and was promoted to Brigadier General in 1959. You obviously know Julia Child as one of the first television chefs, but not only was she a World War II spy, but even real sharks feared her. Seriously. When the US joined the war effort in September 1941, Child went to work for the American Red Cross in Pasadena and attempted to join 2 military-adjacent agencies, the Women's Army Corps and the Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Services. At 6 feet 2 inches, Child was deemed too tall for both organizations, so in 1942 she headed to Washington, D.C., for a job as a typist in the Office of War Information. She then became a junior research assistant with the Secret Intelligence Operation in the Office of Strategic Services, precursor of the CIA. One of Child's tasks was to maintain files on officers working around the world.
I did want to be a spy, and I thought I'd be a very good one because no one would think that someone as tall as I would possibly be a spy.
But Child wanted to be closer to the action, so in 1944 she worked for intelligence operations in China and Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. She also served in the OSS Emergency Sea Rescue Equipment section and helped develop cutting-edge spy technology for military use. She also was instrumental in creating a shark repellent used on underwater explosives to ensure they made their way to their Nazi U-boat targets. Bet you didn't have that on your bingo card. When the US joined World War II in 1941, Clark Gable was too old for the draft. He was already 40. Instead, he was made head of the Hollywood Victory Committee, an organization that used celebrities to boost morale and promote war bonds. Gable's wife, actor Carol Lombard, was also part of the war bond effort, but in January 1942, on the way home from an event, she was killed when her plane crashed into a Nevada mountain. A devastated Gable wired President Roosevelt asking to be sent to the front lines. The answer was no, so Gable signed up for the Army Air Corps, enrolling both officer school and aerial gunnery school. He was dispatched to the 351st Bomb Group in England to make instructional films for gunners. Gable then embedded himself and a camera on 5 Allied bombing raids to shoot combat footage. On one flight, Gable's plane came under fire and a shell struck his boot and grazed his head. By the time he was discharged in 1944, Gable had risen to the rank of major. Izar Danielevich Dembski had recently changed his name to Kirk Douglas with an eye toward a career in theater when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. A wave of young actors volunteered for stateside operations making training films or for USO tours, but not Douglas. He wanted to fight, telling Playbill, "I felt a wave of patriotism and a wave of Jewishness about what was happening in Europe with Hitler.
I can beat him. You know I can beat him."
After he was unable to pass the dexterity test required to become an Army pilot, Douglas joined the Navy and was stationed in the Pacific Theater. Ensign Douglas was trained in anti-submarine communications and gunnery activities and assigned to a sub-hunter, a ship that hunted Japanese submarines. During one such mission, misfired artillery blew up on the surface and sent Douglas's ship into the air. Slammed into the ship, Douglas suffered serious abdominal injuries and was sent to recover at a Navy hospital in San Diego. There, doctors diagnosed him with chronic dysentery, which led to his discharge in 1944. Alec Guinness joined the Royal Navy in 1942, and for the first year he mainly participated in exercises and transports until he was needed for bigger missions.
One day the war will be over. I hope that the people who use this bridge in years to come will remember how it was built and who built it.
In 1943, the HMS LCM-24, a landing craft under the command of Sub-Lieutenant Guinness, was part of Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of the Axis-controlled island of Sicily. On the way to the mission rendezvous, Guinness's ship picked up 200 men from the Royal Highland Regiment, which meant they didn't get the message that the invasion had been delayed by an hour. As a result, Guinness and his men were the first to arrive for Operation Husky, and he and the sailors sustained heavy artillery fire from land and sea. In the 1950s and 60s, Robert Stack played real-life federal agent Elliot Ness on The Untouchables and became iconic to another generation in the 80s with both a role in Airplane and as the host of the spooky Unsolved Mysteries.
These intriguing stories all need one final clue, one final piece of information before they can be solved.
But Stack's first brush with fame was as an athlete. A skilled marksman, he joined the All-American Skeet team at the age of 16, eventually setting a couple of world records and winning a national championship. For real. In 1942, inspired in part by the death of his To Be or Not to Be co-star Carol Lombard, Stack interrupted his film career to enlist in the U.S. Navy. Assigned the rank of ensign, he became an aerial gunnery instructor. Near the end of the war in 1945, Stack was discharged, having earned the rank of lieutenant. Ted Williams is arguably the most famous baseball player to serve in World War II, but his service record might not be what you thought it was. Before America joined the war effort, Williams was rejected from service on account of being his mother's sole provider. But after Pearl Harbor, Williams pleaded with the draft board to let him fight, and he was allowed to enlist in the Navy after the conclusion of the 1942 baseball season. Williams had his sights set on being a naval aviator, and he attended ground pre-flight and flight school. In 1944, he earned his commission as a second lieutenant in the Marines, and after more education, trained would-be combat pilots in Florida and Hawaii. In the summer of 1945, Williams waited for a chance to fly an attack as a combat pilot replacement, but the war ended before he got the call. So all those combat missions you think he flew? Well, those were during the Korean War. Yep, Ted Williams served during both wars, so when we do a video on famous people in that war, you'll see those exploits mentioned then. Mel Brooks took pointed shots at history's most hateful villains, particularly Adolf Hitler.
Hey, man. I leave you, baby, I leave you.
But before he ever made a movie, Brooks, aka Melvin Kaminsky, did what he could to fight the Nazis. Drafted in 1944, Brooks scored exceptionally high on the entrance test, which earned him a spot in the Army Specialized Training Program for Instruction in Combat Engineering. After basic training, Brooks was dispatched to France and Belgium as a forward artillery observer in the 78th Infantry Division. Later a member of the 1104th Engineer Combat Group, Brooks was on the front lines in the early moments of the Battle of the Bulge. His job was to clear away landmines placed by Nazi forces to allow for safer passage by Allied troops. On 5 different occasions, Brooks found himself in close combat with German troops. When the war ended in April 1945, Brooks was working reconnaissance missions in northern Germany. In February 1943, the Marine Corps, the last gendered holdout in the U.S. Armed Forces, opened its ranks to women for the Women's Reservist Division. The aim of the program was to move as many male Marines to combat positions and bring in women to perform support services. Around 20,000 women became Marines over the last 2 years of World War II, including Bernice Frankel. Name doesn't ring a bell? How about now?
People expect to see me in a sensational dress.
What do they expect to see me in? A yarmulke and a hefty bag?
The 20-year-old future Bea Arthur was already working as a civilian air raid warden when she signed up for the Marines 5 days after they opened their ranks to women. She was trained at the Women Reservist School in New York, then was stationed at the Marine Corps Air Station in North Carolina as a driver and dispatcher. When she was discharged in the fall of 1945, Bernice Frankel had made it to the rank of Staff Sergeant. In 1944, a few months after his 18th birthday, Anthony Benedetto was drafted into the U.S. Army and received his infantry rifleman training. He was assigned to G Company 7th Army 63rd Infantry Division and sent to France. The unit had taken major losses in the Battle of the Bulge and needed a wave of fresh troops to round out its numbers. He was still about 5 years away from changing his stage name to Tony Bennett. According to Bennett's memoir, The Good Life, on the first morning, General Patton himself woke Bennett and the other new troops at 4 a.m., proclaiming, "Now listen up, forget your mothers and everything else you've ever known." Bennett was immediately put to work digging foxholes in the frozen ground to offer protection from German gunners. On his first night, Bennett barely avoided a deadly hit, writing, "The front was a front row seat in hell. It was an absolutely terrifying spectacle."
When you first go to the line, you see a dead person. He could be the enemy, but you look at it and just say, what a tragedy, you know.
In the spring of 1945, Bennett's group was at work capturing small towns in Germany, securing them one home at a time. His last wartime act was to help liberate a Nazi concentration camp outside of Landsberg. As he remembered, "We immediately got food and water to the survivors, but they had been brutalized for so long they couldn't believe that we were there to help them and not to kill them."
Okay, let's hit it, boys.
Before rock stars were a thing, the most famous musicians were band leaders. Leading big orchestras and dance bands, conductors like Glenn Miller ruled the pop chart. The Glenn Miller Orchestra scored 25 big hits in 1939 alone, and Miller, along with his small army of musicians, boosted morale throughout the early years of the war, until Miller decided to join the actual army. He was in his late 30s by then, too old for the Navy, so Miller headed to the Army's Air Force, where he was assigned to form and lead the 418th Army Air Forces Band. Made up of soldiers, the band provided solace and entertainment for the troops who played in the band, and their audiences of young men stationed far from home engaged in a terrifying war. In December 1944, en route to a performance in Paris, Miller's plane went down over the English Channel and was never recovered.
This is beginning to feel like deja vu all over again.
Yogi Berra is probably more well known today for lines like that, but he was a tremendous baseball player and legit war hero. He made his big league debut in 1946, 3 years after he'd first played in the minors, because he'd taken a break to serve in the military. The 18-year-old Berra joined the Navy in 1943 as part of the top-secret operation that would later be known as D-Day. He was on one of the first boats to come ashore in the June 1944 invasion. Berra was one of 6 men on board tasked with attacking German machine gunners to clear a path for the foot soldiers storming the beach. After surviving the chaotic but pivotal operation, Berra took part in a similar mission in late 1944, securing the liberation of southern France.